Yeah, so I'm sick as shit. I've been sick for about a week now. And when you're sick, you need to get better. And what's the best thing to do? Chicken soup from scratch. Yeah, after a couple days of being sick, I lost my voice. I'm working in the restaurant still, not being able to take time off because I'm sick. My voice hasn't come back yet. Hopefully it comes back quick enough to do the voiceover for this video, because you don't want to hear me talk like this. I might not get all the best camera angles and everything today, because I'm just going to try to get this done, because I need to get some chicken soup in me. Normally I clean up in between scenes. Today I'm just going to cook it as fast as I can. One of the things you want to keep in mind when you're making chicken soup, it's all about the stock. The stock needs to be nutrient dense. Really the only way to do that is to use lots of veggies, lots of chicken. So we're going to be going a little overkill here. Keep in mind, all the chicken that you see me use, I've had most of it in the freezer. There's scraps and other things. Otherwise, a pot of soup like this would cost probably over $100 to make. But at least for this video, I get to bust out some of my bigger equipment that I haven't used on the video yet. And since we're going overboard, might as well go overboard with the cutlery too. So let's get started.
As we start with a hell of a lot of produce, and first is the carrots. We need a lot of produce and meat to create a super nutrient-dense broth if we want this soup to have any sort of healing properties to it. I first take the ends off them. I'm basically prepping them to be washed. I want to use some of the greens from them as well, and there is a lot of nutrients in the skin, so I definitely don't want to peel these, even though it might be easier to do so. I took a fresh, clean sponge, and this is a great way to wash them fast. Yeah, of course, no soap. I know it might seem weird to wash a vegetable with a sponge, but it works very well, especially for potatoes. Not gonna show the washing, but I think you can imagine how it's done, right? Now that we have some cleaned organic carrots, I break them all down. Not really needing to chop up most of the veggies you will see here, but we want this all to fit in the pot. Some carrots I set aside for later. I also threw in some of the greens as well, not necessarily for flavor, but for the properties. Next, we have some leeks. Prep them up for easy cleaning. Won't get into the specifics of how to wash each type of produce properly today, because that would make for a long, boring video. But anyways, just hack these up once washed and into the pile. Then I quartered some onions, peel and all, into the pile. Of course, we need a lot of celery here. Once washed, I set some stalks aside with the reserved carrots, and the rest gets broken down into the stock pile. A whole bunch of kale gets a rough breakdown and into the pile as well, and some goes into the reserve container for later. Poblanos and jalapenos get seeded and chopped up. This gives a nice spice level to clear sinuses and slightly add some flavor and more nutrients. Followed by a couple lemons, a bunch of fresh thyme, and about a half a bunch of fresh rosemary. A nice piece of fresh ginger as well. This has major health benefits that I won't get into here, but everything in this soup is designed for boosting the immune system. Then goes in some dried chilies. I had these on hand, and you can pretty much use whatever dried chilies you want, or just leave them out if you don't want the spice. A decent amount of black peppercorns. They will mellow out as they cook for a long time, so you can use a lot. Also, some bay leaves. Just don't add any salt until the very end. Now that's quite a pile of produce, wouldn't you say? Can't even see the carrots and onions under all that, but let's set that aside for right now as we get going with our chicken. All this is what I've been saving in the freezer. I have lots of scraps left over for making chicken wings and deboning thighs. Now for a darker color and richer flavor of the stock, it's good to roast the bones. I'm going to eventually roast about half of everything you see here, so I'll be separating it into 2 batches as we go along. I had a bunch of leg quarters in the freezer as well that I thawed out. I could take the time to debone everything, but I'm not concerned with being perfect here since I was sick and needed to get this done. So a cleaver comes in real handy to just chop everything up. I do want the middle of the bones exposed to let the marrow and nutrients leach out into the stock. It's oddly satisfying to chop up chicken in this way, so get yourselves a cleaver and you'll understand. Everything in the half pan will not be roasted. Everything on these 2 trays will get a light coating of oil and get roasted in a 425-degree oven for almost an hour. Don't put it on foil like I did because it starts to stick. I wanted less cleanup by using foil, but since they started to stick, I had to transfer them into a shallow full pan anyway though, and then had more dishes to wash in the end. Fantastic. But after roasting, they should be nice and dark in color and crispy like this. Finally, time to get the stock pot going, and this means a big pot. or lots of smaller pots if you don't have a big pot. I added all the produce in, and yeah, I know, it looks like there won't be room for everything, but this will all wilt down. The lemons and spices I set aside, and those will go in just a second. Raw chicken on top to weigh everything down, then the roasted chicken. It really doesn't matter the order as long as everything can fit in. There is some great fond at the bottom of the pan that we will harvest in just a second here. Any pan dripping from the trays that you roasted the chicken off goes in. I had another pot of boiling water on the stove to get this moving a little faster, even though it will need more water than this. The shallow full pan with the fond, I added a bit of boiling water to it and scraped up as much of the fond as I possibly could and added it in. Every last bit of chickeny goodness counts here. Top it off with enough water to get everything submerged. Bay leaves and the peppercorns. 2 whole lemons get squeezed and thrown in. Now it's time to get this bad boy on the stove on high heat and bring it to a boil. Even though I added as much boiling water as I could beforehand, it will take a while to get this whole thing to a boil. So I added a tilted lid for venting, and if you notice, I put a probe thermometer in the water. This is my trick so that I can walk away and not have to worry about potentially water boiling all over the stove on me. Since water boils at 212, just set the alarm to about 207 degrees or so that the alarm will go off a few minutes before it boils. When it comes to a boil, adjust the heat down to a low boil, and this will slowly simmer for about 6 hours. You can let it go longer if you want, and that will only increase everything. Typically, you can get away with about 3 hours in smaller pots, but for this size, I would recommend at least 4 to 5 hours, and I thought it was perfect after about 6. When your stock is almost ready, let's prep the chicken that will actually be in the soup at the end. I have some boneless, skinless chicken breasts, and all I did was a rough butterfly on them. Basically, just make the meat even thickness so that everything cooks evenly. Salt and pepper on both sides, a little oil in the pan, and sear them off just to get some color on them. We are not cooking them all the way since they won't all fit in the pan at once. One by one, I seared them off to get a nice color on them, and into a 400-degree oven for around 10 minutes until they are cooked nice and juicy. Now, just let them cool down all the way, and cooling them is an important step into keeping them juicy. I transfer them to a plate to cool, and any of that juice on the pan goes into the stock, of course. And remember the carrots and celery I reserved at the beginning of this? I just cut it into small pieces, and this will go in the final soup, just cooking it until tender, which we will do very soon here, along with the extra kale. The cooled chicken breasts get cubed up, or whatever size you want them in your final product. 6 hours of simmer time has a nice stock for us, and it's absolutely jam-packed, full of nutrients from the bones, gelatin, produce, chilies, ginger, lemons, and everything else. This combo boosts the immune system, and while it's not typical in regular chicken soup, it will revitalize you incredibly, as it did for me. We are only keeping the liquid since the meats and veggies have given up all their properties into the water. This is a 2-step straining process. The pot on the left is what the final soup will be cooked in. For this amount of stock, this will be done in batches, obviously. Strain through a coarse strainer. Take a ladle and smash down the debris to get every last drop of liquid out of it, then discard the matter content. Then pass that same liquid again through a fine strainer if you have one. Repeat this step until you have harvested all of your stock. I needed an extra container since I had more stock than would fit into the final pot, but that's a good thing because any extra stock you have that you won't use today can be cooled down and frozen. Then you'll be able to make this again in the future without the long stock making process next time, or use the stock for other cooking applications. So our final stock pot is back on the stove, and I'm going to skim off the oils and impurities on top. I skipped this step in the big stock pot, not because I actually skipped it, but because there wasn't any scum floating on top. I'm not actually sure why there wasn't, because normally part of stock making is having to regularly skim off the scum that floats on top. Maybe it was all the veggies that broke down the scum or something, but I'm unsure of the reason. Let me know in the comments down below if you know why there wasn't any scum that developed in this stock. During this process of skimming off the final impurities, I was also letting it reduce by an inch or two, just to concentrate things a bit more. Now that it's almost 1 in the morning, and I had started shooting this video around noon, let's finish this soup. Chopped kale goes in, along with the carrots and celery. Lid goes on angled to vent, and just let this go for around 30 minutes or until the veggies are tender to your liking. When everything seems ready to go, make sure to taste it at this time for seasoning. And yes, it definitely needs salt since we always season stocks at the end. Finally, let's assemble our soup. Chicken goes in the bowl. Yeah, the soup will heat it up immediately, so don't worry. And some orzo pasta as the noodles this time. I know I didn't show me cooking the pasta, but give me a break. And then just ladle your immune boosting broth and veggies into it. This is definitely not your average chicken soup. It has a more complex flavor and is extremely delicious. I ate this soup for the rest of the week and I felt revitalized after the first day. This isn't some magic cure or anything, but when you're sick, it's surely worth it to make for yourself to make yourself feel the best you can. It not only boosts your immune system, but it also gives you energy as well. Eating things like this will actually help prevent you from being sick in the first place, and I should make things like this more often for sure. I hope you learned something today. Make sure to like this video, and remember you can watch all my content on YouTube, Odyssey, and Rumble. Tag me on Instagram if you make any of my recipes. Follow me on Truth Social and Twitter. Until next time, make sure to treat yourself right, cook yourself something good. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next video.